All right. Hi, everybody. I just want to quickly talk a little bit about the daybook and give you some ideas about how you can use the daybook throughout the semester to help you read, write, and think about the work that we will do in our class, but then to write, read, and think about the world around you. I want the daybook to become something that you use across the spectrum of your life and not just for our class. And I'll talk a little bit about that as I go through this. So what is a daybook? Well, a daybook is simple. It's just a composition book. You know, the old school 50-cent composition books that are marbled colored, at the front. And it's bounded and it has all these pages in it that we use to fill up. And what do we fill up those pages with? I have a description of this in your handouts. It's described by a lot of people as a kitchen junk drawer. So you know that drawer that you have in your kitchen that has all sorts of stuff that you don't know if you'll need. Sometimes you need it all the time, sometimes you don't. Like in my kitchen drawer, junk drawer, I have like a screwdriver, I have extra screws, I have different batteries, I have receipts of stuff, I have sticky notes, I have pencils, pens, you name it. So, like a little small hammer. I mean, random stuff. And sometimes I'll go months without using things in that kitchen junk drawer. And there are some things in that kitchen junk drawer that I use every day. And that's kind of the essence of a day book. It's something that contains a bunch of things that you've recorded that you may use or you may not use in the future. Don Murray describes a day book in this way. He says, I'm able to make use of fragments of time because my tools, first and foremost my daybook, are with me at all times. My daybook, or writer's log, is what some writers call a journal. When I wrote in a journal, I would swell up like rice in water and fill the space with wordy pronouncements. I tried to be Camus or Guide, or someone famous and probably secretly imagined students reading my journal after I was dead. I was unbearable, unreadable, even by me. I'd write for a few days, read it over, and laugh. I lost years, whole decades, when I could not keep a journal. I also tried to keep a diary, but the trivial details of my life were so trivial I was embarrassed reading them. The term daybook, however, somehow freed me. It was a working document, a sort of lab notebook. And since I have called it a daybook, it's become the most valuable resource I have. I use an 8 by 10-inch notebook because it fits in the outside pocket of the case I sling over my shoulder. I keep that case with me at school and at home, in the car, when I'm traveling, and by my chair in the living room or in my office or out on my porch. I may be just sitting, remembering Flannery O'Connor. Quote, but I know one thing, if an idea does come, I am ready for it. The daybook has a page large enough to allow me to get a good chunk of writing done. Smaller notebooks seem to compress me. I don't have the area in which to explore ideas. Larger books become cumbersome. They stop traveling with me. I use a spiral book because it can be bent back easily and made to fit in my lap or whatever surface I have in front of me. I also like green tinted paper because I often write outside perched on a rock or a log, and the green page limits the glare. It takes me about 6 weeks to fill a day book, and when I'm finished with one, I go back through it and pick out anything I need to work on in the next book. Usually this means a page or two of notes at the most. I keep the day books on a shelf, and since everything is entered by date, I can usually remember about when I wrote something and go back to it if I need to. The fact is, I don't go back that much, but the process of writing down is vital. Talking to myself, and the day book is a record of my intellectual life, what I'm thinking about, and when I'm thinking about writing. I use little code words in the left-hand margin. The initials for this book were AWTW, a writer teaches writing. And that was the code I put next to notes about what might be in this book. It's easy for me to review the daybooks to see what I've written on a particular project. Many of my articles and books evolve over a period of years, and the daybook both stimulates and records my thinking. If you decide to try a daybook or a log, remember that it does not contain finished writing. It can be a place for writing, a draft, but my book, at least, has all sorts of other writing that doesn't even look like writing. Everyone's daybook will change and evolve as the writer changes and evolves, but mine includes observations of people and places, not as many as I'd expect, questions that need answers and answers that need questions, lines that may become poems or stories or articles or books, notes for class, for talks I'm going to give, the notes I've used to talk from in class or at meetings, plans for what I may write, and schedules, pages of schedules, all unrealistic of when I may write them, titles, hundreds of titles for what I'm writing, leads, dozens of leads, and often ends for what I'm writing, quotes, outlines, diagrams, drafts of poems, articles, chapters, ideas, discussion with myself about writing problems I'm trying to solve, quotations from my students or colleagues that I need to think about, postcards or other pictures that stimulate me, paragraphs from newspapers and magazines I may want to keep, chunks of drafts, titles of books to read, pre-writing, notes on lectures. So I want to just take you into my daybook. I pulled this one off the shelf from, a few years ago. And I just want to kind of go through it so you can kind of see different things that I have in my daybook. And I usually start my daybook with a table of contents. And so what I'll do is I'll pass through the first 2 or 3 pages and leave them blank. And then as I kind of build, um, build right in the other pages, I'll add them over to the table of contents. This is actually from a different daybook. I'll jot down lots of different ideas. I'll jot down plans. This is some different plans I have for teaching or plans that I have for writing. I'll write drafts. I'll often write poems or, here's the concrete poems on the left and 2 voice poems on the right. So I'll often do those in there. A lot of times I'll do drawings. So, sometimes the words don't really come to me as clearly as images do. And sometimes I just put a bunch of drawings or images in my daybook. Reflections. After I teach a class, I'll I'll record, what I thought about that particular class period. Notes. So whenever I go and listen to people talk, I always take notes. I find that I go back to those notes quite often and I weave them into different things that I write or different things that I post about. Observation. So when I watch somebody um, teach, or if I see or hear things that I think are really interesting or things that I notice, I'll record those observations in my daybook. I'll react to different things. So, I mean, if I'm sitting in a meeting and I'm just like really fired up, I remember this one. This was a meeting that I was sitting through, and the speaker was driving me nuts. And so I just took my daybook to write down my thoughts and opinions and kind of counter it. If I come across something really relevant from a newspaper or magazine, I'll rip it out and I'll put it in my daybook. Or if I'm reading it digitally, I'll try to print it off and then tape it or glue it into my daybook. Draw maps, diagrams. I'll put handouts in there, and this is a big one for you as teachers. Every single time I would teach a mini lesson or anytime I gave a handout to students, I would put a handout in my daybook. So I think that's actually a pretty important kind of lesson. And then I'll put checklists in there. So, at the end of my daybook, I might have a page that's my editing checklist. And whenever I come across a really good editing lesson, something that someone teaches me, I'll try to add it into my daybook so I can remember that um, when I'm about to publish a piece and want to edit it before I publish it. So it's just all sorts of things that go into my daybook. Um, what I really notice about my daybook though is it really truly does go everywhere I go. I really feel nervous if my daybook isn't nearby. So it really does go to my nightstand when I go to bed. It goes to church with me when I go to church. It always goes to school with me. It always goes to meetings. I find actually meetings the best time to write stuff in my daybook. But here's the thing, it's a daybook, so that means I have to use it. That means I do use it every day. It's not a week book. It's not something just use once a week. And it's not a month book. It's a day book. And it's literally become a big part of my life. And so in my office at work, I actually have two whole shelves just full of day books. And occasionally I'll pull one out. The other day I pulled one out and I went through it, and it was really revealing. It just showed my life at that time, and it was really kind of fascinating to read through. So the daybooks do, in some ways, become um, an artifact of a particular time period in our life. And what's really important is for you to keep a day book. Once you see the value of a day book, and once you see all the different ways you use it yourself personally, um, you'll see the power a daybook can have within a classroom of students. I've seen people use daybooks in grades 2 and up. So I don't typically see daybooks very often in kindergarten and first grade. I have seen teachers do uh, a clump of maybe 20 blank pages with no lines that they staple and give to the student, a young student, to serve as kind of like a mini daybook that they might use for a week or 2 weeks. Um, so that might be a way of thinking about that if you're an early childhood teacher. So I want you to be thinking about, how do you envision your day book? How will you use your day book? What types of writings will be included in your day book? And then in what ways do you see something like this helping you as a teacher, writer, and learner? So be thinking about that as the semester goes along, so that this day book becomes a tool of thinking for you. And remember, when a book becomes the main tool in your classroom, everything goes in it and the pages start filling up. All right. That's the end of my description about daybooks, but I also have a video of a young boy talking about his daybook that I recorded a couple years ago when I spent some time in his fourth grade classroom. So I hope you enjoy that as well. Thanks, everybody.